Back at the description that I had given originally quite a few weeks ago, and as I went through and just dug into the research about technology and children, wow, mind blown, I'm sure you can imagine. It's a huge topic, and narrowing it down took quite a bit of effort. And so what I actually ended up with is a little different than what I originally thought I might be talking about. With child development, though, everything is pretty interrelated. So even though I'll be talking about resilience in children and the trajectory um, from resilience in children to resilience in adults, it still really hits the topics that I had thought that I might be connecting with, which is cognition, social and emotional development. So just a disclaimer. So, but the questions I hope to answer today for you are: what experiences are important and the most impactful in childhood? How do those experiences impact adult well-being? And how does technology impact those experiences? So first, I think as I was looking through and I was listening to the series over these last few weeks that you've all been part of, I am just blown away by all of the applications of technology. And of course, you know, those all apply to our infants and toddlers as well, because they are very impactful for our families. So I felt like I maybe needed to narrow that down a little bit too. So of course, there's energy, batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, all of the things that provide energy that allow our infants to live in comfort, electricity, manufacturing advancements. There we go. Okay. Okay, there we go. Technology. Of course, medical has a huge impact on our children, our very young children. There are many advancements that have provided an amazing quality of life for children that they never would have had years before. Transportation and communication, both passive and direct, interactive communication. So today we're going to focus on communication technology and our youngest children being, for the purposes of this conversation, birth to 5 years old. So one thing we've known for years, studies began way back in the early 50s, early 40s, on how experiences of childhood impacted our adult lives. So back then there were two camps of thought. You know, there were people who believed that those experiences mattered and changed a person. And there were people who believed that you got to be an adult and you decided on your own who you were going to be and what you were going to do. It was a lot of responsibility laid on adults to just do the things they needed to do without worrying about where they came from. But now we know that childhood experiences can really significantly influence an individual's life, really shaping every part of their life: personality, health, well-being, and really just overall trajectory of their life. So back in the 90s, there was a really important study that happened. It was the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. It was coined the ACEs. And the term ACEs, you'll hear often in early childhood circles. ACEs refers to adverse childhood events. The study involved 17,000 workers who completed physical exams. They took tests or took they went through questionnaires that questioned their life, what was happening in their life, what their personality was, and looked at adverse childhood experiences that may have occurred in their life, in their childhood. And what they made was some really important connections between what happened in their life that may have considered to be not ideal with the trajectory of their life and the circumstances of their adulthood. Quite a number of different adverse childhood experiences were identified in that study, including physical, emotional abuse, abandonment or neglect, losing a family member to suicide, growing up in a household with substance abuse, mentally ill parenting, incarcerated parents, being a child of divorce, coming from low income, low levels of education, high levels of stress, high levels of economic stress, growing up in a family that's not close-knit and doesn't talk openly about their feelings, having parents who use spanking, corporal punishment, parents who themselves had been abused and neglected, living in a community with high rates of violence, economically disadvantaged communities, high levels of substance abuse in your community, and a community with very few resources for children. So ACEs, it can cause what we call toxic stress. And just to back up a little bit, I want to say ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are also called risk factors. So risk factors mean that the person who experiences those childhood events are at risk for adverse adult outcomes, but it's not inevitable. So it can cause what's called toxic stress. That's a stress where the body is flooded with such an intense hormone, stress hormones, that it actually changes a person's metabolism. It can change their immune system, their cardiovascular system, and it impacts their brain and nervous system. That topic was a whole nother community conversation. That's a really big topic, how toxic stress can impact how a person's brain develops and how their nervous system develops, and what that means for a person who's trying to live a really productive life. There's a cumulative effect when it comes to toxic stress. So the greater the impact it has, the greater the number, the greater the impact it has. Toxic stress can predict some adult outcomes. Again, remember, this isn't inevitable. It's just a prediction of risk. Difficulty forming close relationships with others, trouble keeping a job, difficulty with finances, depression, more likely to be involved in violence, early unwanted pregnancies, more likely to be incarcerated, higher levels of unemployment, more likely to expose their own children to ACEs. Do you see there where the cycle starts? Higher risk of alcohol substance abuse, higher risk of suicide attempts, higher risk of health issues, including heart disease, cancer and lung disease, liver disease. But there are also, they identified in this particular study, positive childhood experiences. Those experiences can lead to adaptation and resilience. So hold on to the word resilience. We're going to do a little exploration around that. Some of the key domains would include healthy family, social, and emotional processes. And when we say healthy family, social, and emotional processes, we're focusing on the word processes. Every family has their own system, how to manage their social and emotional lives. Some have really functional processes. It doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means they have a system in place to deal with the big things that come up. Family healthy lifestyles, health resources available to the family and the child, external support systems, healthy family relationships, good communication, support, and feelings of emotional safety and belonging. So you're probably thinking, what's this have to do with technology? This whole series is about technology. And I'm hoping what you're doing is thinking about technology, particularly communication technology, and thinking about how all of these things may be impacted by technology use in the family. And we might also say screen time, maybe another way to frame that. So resilience is the ability to cope with and recover from setbacks. People who remain calm in the face of disaster have resilience. People with psychological resilience are able to use their skills and strengths to respond to life's challenges. So resilience is what we aspire to. Resilience is the thing that, as an adult, can help you cope with all of the other things that may come up. So when we're talking about all of those risk factors, if you think of it in terms of the rain that falls in your life, we know we live in the Northwest. This is a perfect analogy. So some people get just downpours, don't they? Some people have rain that starts at the beginning of their life and doesn't seem to end for quite some time. Other people just have a few sprinkles here and there. So if you think about those risk factors, the ACEs, as rain, then resilience is really the umbrella that covers you and helps keep that rain off of you. So the important protective factors that we know children need to develop in early childhood are, there's three: initiative, their ability to use independent thought and action to meet their needs; attachment; and self-regulation, their ability to control arousal and their response to it. So the ACEs, again, that's the rain that falls in everybody's life, yours, mine, and all the children in our community. The umbrella are the protective factors, and these are developed within the child. They're the personality traits children develop, which promotes resilience. So I'm going to run through these really quick because we have a lot to get through. Watching the time. Initiative, the child's ability to use independent thought and action to meet his or her own needs. A few of the things that you might see are an ability to show interest and enjoyment in other children and their emotions. So these children who have high initiative aren't just playing with other children, they're interested in them and their internal life. Adjusting their energy level to the type of play, recognizing where energy levels are. Pretend play, imitating others, exploring surrounding with the support of familiar adults. Following simple directions, using strategies to make others show interest, and trying to do new things and be persistent. This is not so different from what we think initiative looks like in adults. In adults, initiative is deciding on a positive action plan and doing it. The and is important there, and doing it. Self-regulation is the ability to control your behavior and manage your thoughts and emotions in appropriate ways. I'm sure if you guys stopped and thought for a moment, you would know people who fall in a really wide range of ability in self-regulation, adults or children. Children who have good self-regulation can handle frustration well, accept another choice when one's not available, adjust to changes in routine, calm him or herself with a trusted adult or on their own, follow a daily routine, have regular sleep patterns, and easily go from one activity to another. Children with really healthy, secure attachments will show pleasure when interacting with adults, respond positively to adult attention, calm down with help from a familiar adult. They'll seek out and accept comfort from familiar adults and express a wide range of emotions, make needs known to familiar adults. They'll act happy when they're praised, make eye contact, and show interest in their surroundings, respond to their name when spoken to, and they trust familiar adults and believe what they say. So I left attachment for last because I cannot tell you how critical the area of attachment is, and it really plays a big role in this conversation we're having about the use of technology by infants, toddlers, and preschoolers and their families. Attachment's critical for child development. It shapes trust and safety. It builds self-worth, resilience, teaches children how to form a healthy relationship, promotes developmental outcomes and helps them cope with distress. So if you think of child development, what you should think about is the foundation. What is child development built on? It's always built on healthy attachment. It always comes first. Every developmental trajectory comes from this fertilized ground of healthy, trusting attachment that they have with some familiar or close adult. So we're looking at those 3 areas that are critical to resilience, right? We've got those 3 areas. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Oh, technology. I don't know what we clicked on here that my, just my, yeah. There we go. Okay. Okay. So how do we promote these really important characteristics? Actually, I'm just going to run through all of these. So all 3 of these areas require actual attention to the child. So one of the things to think about when we're thinking about what activities parents and children engage in is we need to think about how do we help kids manage and understand emotions? How do we help them recognize their feelings? And we need to do that with the help of trusted, familiar adults using a wide range of different methods, which might include make-believe play or reading books or just talking about what's actually seen. We need to teach them about all of the different emotions other people feel and the emotions that they're feeling as well. We need to help them provide boundaries for themselves. We need to provide boundaries for them to help them feel safe. Go through all those. Whoops. Let me go back. Here we go. Providing them with autonomy to help them with decision making. So providing safe spaces for them to make decisions for themselves and to ask for help. And when I say safe spaces, I mean limited stress, spaces that are free of danger or perceived danger. We need to celebrate children. We need to see them, recognize them, and we need to celebrate them. And that is what builds attachment, fosters independence, builds initiative and attachment. So the most important strategy that we can use to promote a really resilient child is play. It kind of checks off most of the boxes, really. Are children playing on their own? Are you playing with them? Are they playing with peers? What does the play look like? How productive is it? How constructive is it? Really, how joyful is it? Because that's really what's the most important thing when we're looking at how do we hit all of those areas. I love this quote: the inherent joy and effective nature of play, along with the stimulation to multiple brain networks, all of the areas of the brain, make play particularly effective in maintaining and developing the skills needed to deal with challenging and changing circumstances, as well as resilience and creativity to adapt. So we just talked about what our children in the community need in order to protect them from that rain, that umbrella, the protective factors. So what gets in the way of those protective factors developing in the children? So I'm really interested to hear from you whether or not some of these statistics are shocking, whether you think they're higher or lower. One of the things that I found that was so interesting about doing research around this conversation was that there is just a huge amount of research and studies on technology use in children, but it's a kind of all over the place. And this one made me laugh a little because it was March 2020 when these results came out. I'm sure that the folks who did this research had no idea that they were running straight into a pandemic where technology use was going to change dramatically for them. So this is pre-pandemic information that you're seeing here. So 80% of parents said their child 5 to 11 uses or interacts with a tablet daily. 5 to 11, a little above the age group we're talking about, but 63% said that their child age 5 to 11 uses or interacts with a smartphone daily. 48 say their child under the age of 5 uses or interacts with a tablet daily. 55% say their child under the age of 5 uses or interacts with a smartphone daily. And 1/3 of parents of a child 11 or under say their child uses or interacts with voice activated assistants like Apple or Siri. I'm just curious, does that seem right? Are you like anecdotally what you see out there? Does that seem high, low? Like right on track, maybe? Horrifying. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So I did just a quick search for infant toys. And these were a couple of things that came up for me that sort of made me laugh. I was thinking about how infants interact with technology. So there were lots of cell phone toys. Some of them were interactive toys, some of them weren't, but all of them looked like a cell phone. And, I had a classroom that I worked in a few years back, and we all had name tags with our pictures and our IDs. And we started noticing over time that when we would put a child up in our lap to rock them or comfort them, they would take a hold of um, our cards that were hanging and put them up to the phone and pretend to talk on them. It was so common for our kids to be pretending to be on the phone. What was always fun was to hear the things they would say into the phone. You got to hear a little bit about what happens in their home when you hear about the things they talk about on the phone. But these were a few things that popped up as infant toys. What are some infant toys you guys played with? Do you remember anything? Toddler toys? Do Okay, fair point. Uh, with what? Oh, Tinker Toys. Yes, such a great activity for promoting Lincoln Logs. I had some Lincoln Logs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. Legos are still great, but there's still a few things they could do that are a little better as far as promoting creativity. Yeah, that's the truth. So yeah, on this slide, so again, we're looking at Pew Research Center. Again, 2020, prior to pandemic, 29% of kids get information, and we're getting information from devices. 79%, these are children 0 to 4, so under 5 years old. 79% would use devices to play music. Maybe not a bad thing, depends on the music, right? 24% asked to hear jokes. Yeah, prior to Alexa, who did we ask to hear jokes from? Who told us jokes? Yeah. 16% of children 4 and under played games. So again, Pew Research, many parents say their smartphone children begin engaging on the phone before the age of 5. So 31% of children under the age of 2. So 60% under the age of 4 and 86% under the age of 8 began interacting with their cell phones. Again, okay, so let me be fair about this. We don't know what the term engaging means. Maybe some of those people were just FaceTiming grandma or, FaceTiming family that didn't live near. That's a possibility. And when we include, again, all this research, it really just kind of lumps a lot of things in. And one thing I can't tell you happens in this research, I'm sure there's very specific questions being asked, but the reality is technology for children today, it's really everywhere, isn't it? When you go to the doctor's office, to a pediatrician's office, ironically, what's playing? There's a screen and there is a movie playing on it. When we go to restaurants or we go, you see people traveling, cars are sold that have screens built right into them now. The restaurants have screens up on the walls, and sometimes the parents are watching them, sometimes the kids are. There is a huge amount of passive interaction with screens that aren't captured here in these statistics. So in the American Academy of Pediatrics, 346 English-speaking parents with children ages 3 to 5 took part in a study. So at that point, 35% had their own tablet or smartphone, like their own. And of course, if you look online, you can see that they're made for toddlers. They have these, I don't know what you call them, bumper pads or something. They're like made out of rubber so kids can bounce them off walls while they're using them. And I just added this because it was of such interest to me. The most commonly used applications were YouTube, internet browser, quick search, Siri, streaming video services. I just have this big question. What are they looking for? What are kids out there from the ages of 3 to 5 looking for on their devices? But the average daily use among 121, which was the 35%, was 115 minutes per day. Yeah. Adult use of communication. Again, not a lot of statistics about this. So people are spending about an average of 4.8 hours a day on their mobile phones, about a third of their waking hours. The average person spends 6 hours, 40 minutes looking at a screen every day. American adults spend 11 hours per day listening to, watching to, reading, generally interacting with media. You see, there's a lot of different numbers in here. It's really hard to gauge how much people are actually on their screens. TikTok was the most downloaded app worldwide, with users spending 90% more time there compared with 2020. 90% more than 2020. So average mobile usage on smartphones and tablets has increased from 0.3 hours per day in 2008 to 3.3 in 2017. So a lot of modeling going on there. So how is that impacting our children? So now you have sort of like some idea of how much technology is being used, actual screen time for the children and for the parents. So what does that mean for those protective factors that we're looking at? We look at all of the activities, all of the things we hope that those children are developing, there's characteristics we hope they're developing. We have to look at how does screen time impact or may impact the characteristics that we hope they're developing. So studies have shown an inverse relationship between screen time and language. Now, language is a critical skill for children to develop in order to help with self-regulation. Without communication, they're unable to ask for their needs, they're unable to express how they're feeling. And we, again, anecdotally, in the field that I work in, with the folks that we work with, we find that children who have really limited language tend to build just huge amounts of frustration. We see more tantruming. We see less ability to self-calm when their language is lower. So, and what builds language? How do we build language with children? Yeah, we talk to them. We talk to them. We let them watch us talk. Have any of you ever really thought about how complicated language is? When I'm talking right now, my tongue is moving, my lips are forming words. I had to have muscle tone in my mouth. I had to breathe in a certain way to get a certain sound out. There's so many. Language is a really complicated procedure and not an easy one to get if you're not watching anyone else talk, if you're not having circles of communication. So passive consumption of media can really limit thinking, creating, imagining, even the educational. So there's lots of educational devices out there, aren't there? There's all kinds of things that are marketed to our children as being educational, but those things are providing really, really narrow and limited ideas for those children. They're not about creating, they're about providing boxed ideas. And so what does a child do when they go out and into the park and they find a bunch of sticks and dirt and rocks? Yeah, they just find ways to use those things. We might think those kids are going to be bored with sticks and rocks right now, but those children are born with really an amazing capacity for imagination. We've seen kids who just spend all day talking to themselves and interacting. You give them two feathers and they'll talk to each other. It's amazing to me just how that creativity just bubbles out of them, unless you frame their ideas for them and you provide them with characters and with storylines that replace that creativity. And then what do you see in play? You'll start to see them reenacting what they see in the media over and over again, and taking the characters' personalities, and all of their imagination characters have those personalities and those traits. So it really puts a huge limit on their ability to create their own characters and their own storylines. This could be a whole class in itself also. Technology can really impact attention span. So with constant exposure to screens, they can struggle to focus on tasks that require sustained attention. So, there are studies that have been done of fast-paced cartoons. So I don't know, have any of you watched a cartoon lately? Anybody? Okay. Yeah, you have? Okay. How many seconds do you think there are between scene changes? 30 seconds between two scene changes? It's more like less than a second. Scene changes, average, maybe not the cartoon you're watching. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. It's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
That was all there was.
Yes. Yeah. And look at the resilient adult you are today. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I want to address that, of course, we'll talk about that a little bit more down the road, but I don't want to characterize all television programming as the same. It really isn't. And you're right. One program particularly recognized that children who watch fast-paced cartoons, after only 10 minutes of fast-paced cartoons, they were different. They were changed from kids who spent time playing with rocks and sticks. They actually were a little less regulated. So Blue's Clues was a great example of a program that recognized the impact that children's programming was having on children. I don't know, have any of you watched Blue's Clues? Okay, yeah, Blue's Clues does something that when my children were little, I found interesting and curious. I, at that time, maybe might have found it a little annoying. But of course, I recognize now one of the things that would happen is that in that show, Blue, or actually it's not Blue, it would be, what was the name of the character? Steve, thank you. Would ask a question and would stare at the screen for the longest time, just waiting. Strut all the way out. And every week they solved a puzzle. And Blue's Clues played that same video every day for an entire week. And they were using brain research to show how you could use programming to help a child engage and sustain attention and answer the question. And you could repeat yourself for an entire week. And by the end of the week, those kids knew the answers and they were yelling at the screen because they knew the answer. And it actually had a really positive impact on children, of course, keeping in mind that Steve couldn't answer back. All he could do was give the pat answer he gave all the children. He couldn't actually engage in a circle of communication. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are so right, Mr. Rogers. He's my guy. Yep. He is one of the pioneers in that. So one of the things that happens often is that the use of technology really minimizes quality important face-to-face interaction. So this conversation led really nicely into my next slide. So thank you so much for that. While Blue's Clues did some really nice things, and there are some also really high quality programming, the one thing it will never give you is face-to-face interaction, which is circles of communication. And that means that I say something to you and you get annoyed and you give me an annoyed look on your face and I take it back. I start backpedaling and saying, oh, well, wait a minute. What I meant was, that's a circle of communication. You read me, I read you, and we circled through it. There's no better way for a child to learn how to take the perspective of people around them than by watching them and recognizing how they're reacting to you. But with an excessive use of technology, the one thing our kids aren't learning is how to read other people. And it's a critical skill, really critical for our children to learn. It also can play a role in diverting parents from critical activities to promote resilience. So what do you guys think? Do you think parents are on their phones? Do you go to restaurants and see like everybody looking at their phones instead of each other? Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, there's a lot of conversation. This is a really widely debated topic. Technology really can divert. One of the things that one of the most critical things a parent can do is read their child's cues. It's a really important thing for them to recognize what their child's feeling and help them recognize it as well. When you say to a child, "Oh, I see that you're starting to get upset," that seems like a really small statement, but it's a really big statement. One, it helps the child recognize, what is that crazy feeling I'm feeling? And two, it says, I see you and I see you're upset, and it helps them get control of that upset. You ever get like angry at somebody and you just go in like guns blazing and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know I upset you. I can see how mad you are." It just takes the air right out of your sails, doesn't it? It does with kids too, if you see it and you comment on it. It also helps them. How many adults do you know who have big emotions that don't know what to do with them and don't even know what they are? Like, we all do sometimes. Kids, if you help them, if you recognize their cues and help them name those emotions, recognize when they're having them, you help them manage those emotions. So, yeah, 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 they do. Yeah. Yeah, and it makes that time they do have with them even more critical that they not be totally engaged in something else. I'm going to give you an example too, though, of the reading cues. That's just real time example of a concern that's starting to grow in our community from parents not reading the cues of their children. Back in, I want to say, I might get this wrong, 50s maybe. It used to be that kids were potty trained at about 18 months. Well, for us, that seems like crazy because 18 months seems pretty young. The recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics is, 2 to 3 years. But we are starting to see children who aren't potty trained until they're 5 and sometimes 6. And so as a Head Start program, we transition kids into kindergarten, and our kindergarten teachers are starting to complain that these children are not potty trained in kindergarten. So we've seen a 23% increase in children not potty trained in the last 2 years. But what happens? How do you know when you have to go to the bathroom? Could you explain what that feels like? It's hard, isn't it? How do you explain to a child what they might be feeling when they have to go to the bathroom? What you have to do is you have to see them. You have to recognize their cues and tell them it looks like you have to go to the bathroom. That's one of those things that if you're not engaged with your child, if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss those cues, and so's your child. They're not going to recognize that a weird, whatever that is, feeling that you get inside you that tells you, I need to go. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yes, it is so important. Let's talk really quickly about violence. I'm just gonna, whoops. I don't know why it keeps doing this. There we go. Got it. I got it this time. Woo! Celebrate. So when we're talking about infants and toddlers, one of the things that we know is that those children struggle to recognize make believe from real. So Kids, you might be play acting, fighting with your spouse, and kids run over distressed that they think this is real. They can see television versions of violence, and while they recognize it's on television, it feels very real to them. For them to separate out what's happening in real life, what's pretend and what's not, is incredibly difficult. So knowing that about children, what we find is that they really do. I'll get you right at the end. I gotta wrap it up now. Yep. Is that the exposure to violence can be really overwhelming for them. So we know 80% of the games, top games now feature violence, and their sales increased by 204%. Yeah. In a survey of first through third graders, 53% of their favorite games had violent content. 37% of media aimed at children consisted of scenes of violence and verbal violence. So that's to say children are seeing a lot of violence, and that is not even including the passive violence they're seeing when a dad or mom plays a video game on a big screen television while they're in the room. And that's one area. I really looked for studies around that, because we see that in the work that I do, in the field that I'm in. We're out doing home visits, and we see that happening quite often. There is a lot of really graphic violence in games, and the children are sitting witness to it. There are benefits to technology, though. Okay, I'm not here to vilify technology. There's some benefits to it also, with some limits. Exploration and interaction, they're naturally curious. And technology is not going away. It's going to be here. So we need to find the ways that we can use it. There are educational tools that can be really helpful. And even language development, as I said, it can limit it when it's passive engagement, but with appropriate use, we see how adults can use technology as an opportunity to model language, to hear new language. Children can have access to some really diverse content, things that you would not see in your own community. And of course, there's really amazing assistive technologies now for children with special needs. So some of the strategies you might use for technology use would be, really, when it comes down to it, the main thing is engaging with your child, knowing what your child's watching, being with them, finding ways to connect with them in technology use, because it isn't going anywhere. But we can't allow it to replace the really important time that you have with your children, playing with them, engaging with them, and them exploring the world. Recommendations: no screen time for babies under 18 months. I don't know how often that happens. That'd be the ideal world. So because they recognize the needs for hands-on exploration is critical at this age. For 18 to 24 months, so less than an hour a day, with a parent really monitoring. Encourage learning along with a parent. So 2 to 5 years, no more than 1 hour per day, allowing ample time to engage in other activities. I guess, meaning if you are engaged in, if you have a child who's home all day and they have 1 hour, but if you have a child who we scramble all day long and we have 1 hour left at the end of the evening, using that 1 hour to engage in just technology is not a very helpful step also. So some of the things we can do: families can create technology plans. They can find ways to use media in a way that they can be engaged in. Find ways to prioritize play and experiences over technology. Monitor what their children watch. Monitor the content. Businesses and community spaces can offer play options that do not include video games and movies and television. And program developers can focus on interactive games that draw an adult into the game. So again, I wasn't here to vilify technology. It has some amazing applications for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. But I wanted to really think about how do we create the most resilient children that we can, the most resilient adults we can, by providing some structure around and really just very intentional thinking about how we use technology with young children. And I'm really interested to hear all of your thoughts. So I love to hear stories.
So if we have a moment, people can ask questions. Let's see.
I just have a story. So I like your qualification about using FaceTime or something like that to deal with grandchildren who live far away. And a couple of years ago, my 3-year-old granddaughter was doing FaceTime with me. And all of a sudden, all these stickers started appearing on, or emojis were all over the screen. And I said, what are you doing? What's going on? And she didn't know. I mean, she couldn't tell me. And so we just talked through the stickers or emojis. And then when she hung up, my 5-year-old granddaughter was just arriving at the door. And I said, you won't believe this. I was just doing FaceTime with your cousin, and stickers appeared all over the screen, all over my face, hands on hips. Nana, just look in the lower left-hand corner. There's a little rectangular button and I'm going, well, how do they know this? Their parents, both families, the parents are very, very careful about screen time, but they're born knowing this.
Yeah. No, really, technology has given children an unprecedented opportunity to feel superior over the rest of us. And I have to tell you a really quick story and related to that. My mother, when the pandemic started, she realized that she could go to church online. They set it up so that she could join church online. And after about a couple of efforts, she called me up and she said, you can't believe what I did. She was online watching her pastor and she accidentally sent an angry emoji floating up to the screen. And she said, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know what he thinks. He thinks I'm mad about what he said.
Games that could help are something like what we used to do when we were younger, read Choose Your Own Adventure.
Oh yeah, I love
Those were
those.
very educational, and they've got a lot of games that could do that. Violence on TV or on the computer screen. Something that helped us out, me and my brother, is that trust factor with our father. So we watched like the A-Team, for example, and they'd always have a scene where the bad guys would be in a helicopter, smash up against a rock wall or something. They crash and then they miraculously they run away. It's like, hey kids, in real life this does not happen. All right. And it's something as simple as that can really help that child understand between the difference of real and not real. But like I said, it's a very just because of today's society, it's a lost art.
Yeah, and it's about joining them in their screen time, which is not always happening, but it is important. That's the important part, what you said, having conversations about what they're seeing and what it means.
Well, we are out of time. Okay.
I remember when I was a kid, we watched Roadrunner, and that's got a lot of violence in it.
What a anvil violence. What a dynamite.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Kristine for sharing her expertise here and the knowledge, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to be here. I appreciate you guys.
About the difference between the statistics about